this idea that Islam is a religion of peace, why is it that you feel that it's really not?
Well, you know, Scott, in the first place, I have to say, just in terms of clarifying, that it's perfectly understandable why Muslims who are absolutely truthful say Islam is a religion of peace, but they're envisioning peace in a radically different way from what we consider to be peace.
Explain.
Islam is a political and social system as well as a religious one, and it always has been. And the rule of Islamic law, Sharia, is considered to be the perfect model for society, and once it's implemented, then there's peace. And so Islam is a religion of peace, but Muslims must wage war in order to impose that peace upon the rest of
Now,
us.
explain that doctrine, because isn't the world divided, I mean, literally and technically, in
Yes.
Islamic sources into these two areas?
Yes, it's a later, it's not in the Quran itself,
Right.
It's a later elaboration by Islamic theologians, but the world is divided into the Dar al-Islam and the Dar al-Harb. The Dar al-Islam is the house of Islam, and then the house of war is the Dar al-Harb.
So there's a house of peace, because Islam means submission, but it also kind of plays on the word for peace.
Well, in Arabic, as in Hebrew, words are all built up from three consonants,
Right.
the three-consonant base. And so the word Islam is SLM, and then that's also salam, which is peace.
Shalom.
So they're etymologically tied, but actually the peace that is in Islam is the peace that comes through submission, which is not just submission to God, but also submission to the Islamic social order, which is considered to be the law of God.
This is an incredibly deceptive business because superficially, when you look at Muslims, you're struck by their piety. I mean, these are guys who pray, what, 5 times a day?
That's right.
Allah wanted them to do it 50 times a day, but he had to make certain pragmatic adjustments. And they seem to be incredibly devout. And yet underneath, there is this seething cauldron of hatred for the West.
Well, you know, actually, it's the same thing. The piety and the seething cauldron of hatred come from the same wellspring, because it is in the basic text. It's in the Quran. The unbelievers among the people of the book, that's the term. And the people of the book refers to primarily Jews and Christians. And the unbelievers among the people of the book are those Jews and Christians who do not accept Muhammad as a prophet or the Quran as the word of God. So in other words, essentially all Jews and Christians. The unbelievers among the people of the book are called in chapter 98, verse 6 of the Quran, the most vile of created beings. And in chapter 48, verse 29, it says, Muhammad is the apostle of Allah. Those who follow him are merciful to one another, but ruthless to the unbelievers. And so the ruthlessness or the harshness to the unbelievers, you see, is exactly the same motion of piety as being merciful to the Muslims. Anybody who reads the Quran with open eyes is going to see that there's a martial theology in Islam, and that the Quran teaches warfare against unbelievers and their subjugation. And then combine that with the ongoing campaign, the very sophisticated and elaborate campaign of deception that Muslim Brotherhood-led groups in the United States have been carrying out to convey the proposition that's wholly false, that Islam is a religion of peace, and that it teaches tolerance, and that there is nothing in it that anybody needs to be concerned about in regard to warfare against unbelievers or the subjugation of religious minorities in Islamic states.